think there are two main goals for an artist when it comes to the type of experience they're creating. I've started referring to those goals as building and inventing.
Stuff versus other stuff. Fight.
I mean, it's not really one or the other. It's more of a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum is building, where the artist's focus is on perfecting established formulas or genres, building on familiar experiences. On the other end of the spectrum, we have inventing, where the artist's goal is to create a wholly original experience, inventing something unfamiliar and exciting for the audience. Now, this applies to all creative mediums, but I'm going to be focusing on films, because this is a video. It'd be boring to, stare at books. The building end of the spectrum is mostly populated by sequels, remakes, and quote-unquote genre films. Some examples of building-focused films would be Creed, Mad Max Fury Road, The Force Awakens, Mission Impossible Fallout, all of which try to capture that experience of the original films while making them feel more contemporary and, in a lot of cases, improving upon them. There are also original films that focus more on building off of specific genres, like John Wick, which is the action genre perfected, or Chinatown, embodying everything great about noir films. Meanwhile, invention-focused films include everything Charlie Kaufman has written, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and its memory hopping, Being John Malkovich, putting you in someone else's body, Adaptation literally showing you the creation of itself, all totally unique, bizarre, reality-shifting experiences. Under the Skin is another good example, told entirely through the perspective of an interdimensional being, putting you in her shoes, or whatever aliens wear, probably glip glorps. Also, Sorry to Bother You, just in its entirety, just everything about Sorry to Bother You. But like I said, it's a spectrum. No film is entirely recreation or pure invention, and the closer you get to one end of the spectrum, the more off-putting the film generally becomes. Go too far towards the building end and you end up with Gus Van Sant's shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, which was an interesting experiment, but just watch the original. Go too far toward the invention end and you end up with the 1960s film Dog Star Man, an absurdly original film, but when the first 20 minutes are this... I'm good, thanks. All that said, either end of the spectrum still tends to be the main focus for a creator, with the exception of a third option. There are films that are equally focused on building and inventing, focused on capturing established experiences while creating entirely new ones. I call this midpoint of the spectrum reverent irreverent. Everything Quentin Tarantino's made would fall under this category. Classic look, classic music, but totally original structure and dialogue. Baby Driver's style and cinematography owe a lot to 70s car chase films, while also doing something you've never seen before with its musically choreographed action sequences. Even Infinity War does something totally unheard of, taking dozens of characters from pre-existing films and balancing all of their storylines within one film, while still managing to be the epitome of a modern superhero movie. So which one of these three approaches is the best? All of them. Because for the most part, a healthy and satisfying audience experience is a combination of art from all over the spectrum. Too much invention can be exhausting, and too much building inevitably becomes dull. And that's where studios really f*** up. In the 1960s, film studios reached a breaking point. They were struggling to compete with television. God, that sounds so familiar for some reason. Anyway, they resorted to costly gimmicks to get people into theaters. Jesus, just really rings a bell. Writers and directors were totally disposable. Man, I just can't put my finger on it. And instead of trying something new, they decided to invest even bigger budgets into even more formulaic films. But that all changed when the studios, desperate to survive and evolve, started giving passionate new voices a chance with lower budgets but unheard of creative freedom. And that resulted in Bonnie and Clyde, Easy Rider, The Godfather, Jaws, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Taxi Driver, Chinatown, The Exorcist, A Clockwork Orange, Rocky, Star Wars, just all the good movies. All love good movies. And we've reached that breaking point again. We're bringing new, diverse voices into the industry, but they're still restrained by the formulas and the fears of major studios. Studios totally ignore half of the spectrum, seeing original, inventive films as a risk. But when you adjust for inflation, 9 of the top 10 highest-grossing films of all time are original films. Look at pretty much any massive franchise out there, and the film at the beginning of it all was inventive. The modern superhero film wouldn't exist without Superman. Jurassic Park, Lord of the Rings, Toy Story were all revolutionary. And Star Wars was an experience unlike anything anyone had ever seen before, and it was considered a massive risk. Universal Studios passed on Star Wars. Universal Studios passed on Star Wars. Star Wars. For any healthy artistic industry, you need every part of the spectrum. And you can't keep building unless you keep
I got him!
inventing. Hey gals, guys, and otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments where your favorite film lands on that building versus inventing spectrum. That sounds interesting. And if you want more dope videos, go check out the Make Stuff Patreon. Patrons can even get a shout out at the end of every video, like these illustrious stuff makers. The benevolent T.C. Arkenberg, the enterprising Sandy Swagger, the philanthropic Kathy Murphy, the gallant Medium D Speaks, the ingenious Cameron Casey, and all of these other stuff makers for whom I have run out of adjectives. Thank you. And, as always, go make stuff. Alright, just gotta censor one thing real quick to make sure I don't get demonetized.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get caught!
Perfect.